Hello, everyone. It's Isaiah Houston here from Ground Game, and I'm here with.
Mario Jester.
Okay, how you doing, buddy? I know you went to the 250th YCS this past weekend, and how did that go for you?
I thought it did. It went really well. It went really well. We top 64 the event at the 250th. It definitely was a grind, but it was definitely quite an experience.
Yeah. Before we get into any questions, do you have any shout outs you want to give before we get into the profile too much in depth?
Yeah, so first and foremost, obviously shout out to Ground Game. Shout out to all the homies I came with. Shout out to Post Sport Gaming in my native Mansfield, Ohio. Shout out to my play in Arcadia. Shout out to all the homies in the barbershop, Jib and so. Shout out to the homie Kamal for going undefeated. Yes, sir. Shout out to everybody in my room. We all went day two, couple of tops. My homie Pat top 16. My other homie played in the finals of the prize card. Um, Shout out to Ohio as a whole. We had three people top from the state, so we up, y'all.
Sounds like a lot of people that you know did pretty well, and I know you definitely put in the work, so. A lot of times when you put in that work, here are the fruits of your labor. Is this your first top or?
It is my first top. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Once you start getting in there, then, you know, Pack, it took him a while to get in there. Then he started getting in there. He started knocking them back to back. Got my first top eight, and then it's trickled down to YCS top after top. So you just got to get in there and then you stay in there.
Appreciate you, King. It's definitely been a journey, but like to your point, man, we've been in the lab every night for the last 3 weeks. Just with theory, crafting, and I really like the list. I like what we came up with and we're able to put together. So it's definitely a
Yeah.
vibe.
So I'm not gonna go too into the Kashtira cards. People know what Kashtira is by this point, but I guess was there ever a second choice for you, or you kind of always knew you would play Kashtira? Because I knew you was trying Labyrinth for a bit. I had to talk you out of that.
Yeah, honestly, the Kashtira, and I know this deck particularly gets like a lot of hate or just like, it's kind of like mid, but I kind of vibe with it. I vibe with the concepts and intricacies. And then, side note, I can be kind of petty. So sometimes you come from the disrespect with some of the lines you go to Mind Hacker to make your opponent essentially deck out. So I
Yeah.
like that vibe. But definitely, I did vibe with that Labyrinth. I'm glad I was on it for a minute so I can learn the intricacies of that deck and like how it operated. So if I've ran into it, I could play the game like 2 to 3 turns ahead. So definitely worth it. But I definitely was confident and, bar none, foremost, I wanted to play this. So I was happy with my choice.
Okay, I'm glad it worked out for you. I know last minute you switched from a few things that you showed me your list kind of. Well, I don't know, was it Thursday or was it like Tuesday or Wednesday? But you showed me your list. You were pretty happy with it. You said it was almost done, and then it seems like maybe someone convinced you something, but it seemed to work out. So you made a few changes. So I just want to talk about those. Uh, you had end up cutting the set rotation and the scareclaw that we both liked a lot. Um, did you miss that? How was that for you? Like not having that? Did it really matter?
I got you, bro. So yeah. Honestly, so what happened was day zero, actually day -1, if you will. I like talked to my homie Justin. Oh yeah, shoot. Shout out to Rampango Nation. And he went over the theory with me, and the theory kind of like made sense. Normally, it isn't optimal, especially in my opinion as well, to like make changes, especially like since we had been in the lab for the last few weeks, and we did like it a lot. But just as a meta call, those last minute changes, I was kind of sold on. And when we get into those, they actually ended up being the MVP of the entire event of how we did so well. But really the biggest thing was, so I was chilling on Thursday. So it was me, Justin, and Mo, and we ended up getting to play testing. And I kind of tried to tell my homie Mo, yeah, like this card's crazy. And then in short, he's like, I can't see it because like the 4 games I've been peeping game, if you opened up at least one of the pieces or both pieces, uh, every single trip. And I'm like, you know what? That's a valid point. They can just be cards that do different things. So that's how we ended up getting here. But it worked. So
Okay.
and a whole
Yeah,
lot.
and I talked to you. The shifter worked. You took out the cross out. I guess. And you added in the shifters, but you kept the nib in. How was nib?
Nib, so we were actually spot on in our theory. in my experience, which is obviously what I can go off of, in the entire event, no one respected that card. Even a couple of my opponents are like, "Yo, what are the chances?" You guys, and I remember one particularly. Shout out to the homie Adon. I played him from Java, but he was like, "There's no way he kept Nibiru and then straight like dropped it like a grown man." It ultimately didn't matter, but it was crazy because the entire day no one played around it. So when it popped up about I'd say 5 or 6 matches, and it was crazy every time. So definitely glad we played that card particularly.
Yeah, we talked. Yeah. No, I was just gonna say we talked a little bit about trends and like, really it was like a trend where if people are following the last event, they're playing around Nib, so Nib became unpopular. But if people do the opposite of that to respect the Nib, because people aren't putting like, I mean, to disrespect Nib, then Nib is crazy, right? So you kind of
Exactly.
follow that trend to just say like, hey, people are just gonna go off the opposite, and I'm gonna have the counter to the counter. Maybe that's worth doing a video on it because we have the perfect game series to get real in depth and technical talking about those trends. So yeah, I'm glad that Nib worked out for you well. Um, and I'm gonna kind of bounce around here, but I want to talk about this one big eye because we were playing two for a while. Did it really matter? Like I know you probably had to make the space for the Lingaribos, but how was that? The one big eye. Did you miss it? Did you not? Like, talk about that.
So honestly, with that being said, there were a couple times it did pop up. I missed it. I didn't miss it in a critical situation. So like it never popped up to where I'm like, well, dang, I need this Nibiru. Or I'm sorry, Nibiru. Need this big eye. And like, I lost because of not having it or it made a difference. There were a couple of situations where like, I could have flat out killed my opponent if I had it. So looking back, if I could, maybe I'll actually would consider cutting another card. I don't know what that would be off top to fit in the other big eye. But honestly, bro, it just came down to like, we had a game plan going into the event, and I wanted to stick to my game plan. So having the second Lingarebo to play around, obviously in the mirror, if they were to take it out when they see it, or if they were on the same thing, I wanted to like commit, if you will, to being able to have that strategy for my sideboard. So it put me in a position where like I had no choice, at least in my mind. But it ultimately all worked out. So, but yeah, hindsight, I'd probably go back and figure out another way to cut. Maybe it's a third of Rise Heart. Maybe it's um, looking at the Zeus. Zeus, I only played it once where it mattered, and I only used one ever. So that might be a possibility. And one thing I can say is like, especially when we get into the grind game, there was never really a situation where I even needed to Zeus. We just played with their stuff. So
Yeah. So I'm guessing Ibley was crazy then, huh?
Ibley was actually kind of mid.
Ooh.
So in theory, what we came up with, which kind of, because you did ask me a question earlier about crossout, I made the decision to stick to my strategy. So that's why I still kept a lot of the different hand traps in the deck. But Ibley wasn't crazy because people were prepared for it. So the call itself was right. Like no one expected that card coming. It's just one thing I learned is unfortunately a lot of decks have the inherent outs. So like the 2 games I dropped Ibley. One particularly in day one, my opponent had an enemy controller, so it just never really mattered. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of like a inherent out without committing to the Lingarebo and the extra. And then I ran into a Drytron person, and he that was actually an experience. But he had the one up here with the orange light for me, so just never got
Yeah.
there. And just talking, I'm trying to like, yo, because I mean my hand was still crazy, but I'm like, you got to commit to this, right? Like, Ibley essentially turns off your whole deck. You have no way out. Like, yeah, I got to, so he heralded it. But I would say like I was happy with the call. Definitely will play it again.
Oh,
The
you
way
still would play it again, knowing that people are main decking book or econ in a lot of instances.
I would, bro, because if you take the specifics out of it, they have to commit their resources normally that they would to like, let's say, for example, the enemy controller, where that could have like took my Rise Heart, opened up Zeus lines, or like definitely impacted my board state. They now have to use it to get around this card. So, or like Book of Moon, more so. Because now you have to Book of Moon, especially if you don't play the Lingarebo to be able to play the game. That would have been for a Rise Heart. So, I'm definitely chilling with it. I don't think I would change that.
Okay. Okay. And I think the biggest thing, like I've seen a lot of lists at top, they main deck evenly. Um, and it's something that we talked about at the end, that we kind of came to the consensus that like evenly was a mid card against Kashtira, right?
Yeah.
Especially like we still talk about playing the ogre, not searching preparations, just searching the big bang. If our opponent evenlies, we still have maybe a hand trap. We still have a rise hard online. We'll banish the big bang face down and we'll attach it. So when we actually do resolve a rise hard, we actually get a Fenrir too. So they lost a card. So now they have 4 cards, and then we still have 2 interruptions. So is that kind of like the reason why you kind of stayed away from evenly? Like, did you miss it? I don't know if you played any back row or like talk about that.
You know what? Actually, that you said that, I'm gonna be honest with you, bro. So, like when we were testing, I wanted to stick to, and I might catch some heat for this, but I'm gonna stay on my ground. No pun intended.
Okay.
Um, I was convinced and sold on evenly not being necessary, or even for that matter, a good card. And the reason I can back that up is evenly match is ideally good against trap trick, and it's like the only one. Kashtira, it's mid. Sprite, you'll never get that far because most lines, especially with like the Melfi Sprite, they end on like the Herald and the Parrot, especially for the people that are woke. So you'll never even get to resolve it, but you'll have a double evenly to that point. Whenever we get to the side pattern, that's why I made certain choices to be able to deal with them no matter what if I ever ran into Sprite. So when you look at it from that lens, evenly could just be another card. And I did not miss it one time the entire event.
Yeah.
And I cut someone evenly matched, and I did a cute line going back to why we went to. Speaking of which, like to the Big Bang, I did a cute line where he went thrust to search evenly. I like came off of the clapback, so I took all of his stuff, used the big eye, and I did this. I got to a Zeus play, so I hit him in battle phase and started battle. Big Bang banished everything except for my Zeus. So now you're going to use an evenly matched to banish my like Theosis. You know what I mean? So like that part was crazy. I actually torched people with Ogre as well. Some opponents didn't even know what the card did. Particularly, Ogre itself was actually kind of crazy for its inherent effect. I played against Despia around 6-1 or X1, and I kept hitting him with Ogre, so like he'd have like the Brain Infusions or his card to play, and then I put him on top decking like Ash, or put him on top decking like Crossout Designator. So Ogre was like crazy the entire day, especially in that particular matchup. But
Yeah.
Big Bang was definitely a call. In summary, to conclude that, um, one thing for those that don't know is you get into situations with like a Rise Heart, especially with Sprite being very prevalent and people to go to Zeus, being able to set up like an Arise Heart and a Big Bang gives you an extra line of defense, which can make all the difference. Because when they have the extender, you just Big Bang them after the fact. And that in theory should actually solidify your board state.
Yep. Um, and there's 2 more things that I just wanted to point out. Um, I I was under the impression that I feel like the only target worth playing was Goliath, and that'd be the most important target to get. I see a lot of people play Garura. I think the winner played Garura too. I just don't really feel like you need the extra draw. Are you fine with just playing Goliath as your target? And was like, did Baron come up at all during the tournament?
So it would have been nice to have the extra card, but I simply just didn't have the space. And Goliath would have been the best one. So we were actually, at least in my opinion, correct. One thing that I did not call for the event, when we talked about like obviously with it being a tier 1 meta, you can't prepare for everything. We have to choose a deck. I'm going to own this and like follow my sword, but I did not think the Ruining Materia deck would be real, which ended up being very real. Jesse Flores got second place. Definitely, shout out to him for putting in the work. But because we had Goliath, if we ever ran into that, it would have mattered. You know what I mean? Just to be able to turn off it puts someone having like both the runic spells to be able to get over the Arise Heart. So I'm definitely glad I played that over Garura. It never really popped up. Typically speaking, whenever people would out Arise Heart, they would do it with a Kaiju, or they would do it with like Econ taking it, or like other means. It never really popped up in a way where it mattered, you know, to where, hey, me having Goliath, I was able to protect this.
Yeah. Okay. No, yeah, I know Goliath is kind of like the safekeeping, so like it puts them on have like in their engine at least, it puts them on having like a freezing curses. I mean, they still have 6 copies, but it's better than having like 9 copies of something, right? Puts the consistency on being much lower. I
Yes.
guess the last question um, is I noticed you played, so a lot of people play 2 Theosis, 1 Rise Heart. You did 2 3. Did you, everybody says they brick on Theosis. Like, did you have that point of view? You know, I've always been a big fan of 2 Rise Heart at least. How was those cards for you? How was those ratios?
So there were a couple instances I bricked on Theosis. One of my losses was because I drew Theosis for turn and I needed to draw any playable card to get out of my situation. However, I wouldn't change that. The one thing, and I know there's been this back and forth, like to your point of like whether it be 1 Rise Heart or 2 Rise Heart. One thing you brought up actually ended up proving valid. A lot of the lines run through Rise Heart. So that being said, you can't put it on just opening that or being able to search it with just like the math going down. You want to be able to have that. So at the very least, with that and the 3 birth, you can play the game, and that actually popped up a lot because we have the second one. And, you know, we obviously don't want to speak this into life, but we don't ever want to be in a situation where we play 1 Rise Heart and we have to fight to get it back if they banish it in the mirror off of their Rise Heart. So
Yeah.
I feel like having the 2 was actually correct in that instance. I was fine with that. One thing I will say is the MVP card of the list was Shifter.
Okay.
On at least 5 or 6 sets because of that. That was definitely the correct meta call in that aspect. There were a lot of times, like even like in Top Cut, like round, actually even like very quick, like round or day 1 rather, round 9. I ended up playing against Sky Strikers to get out of the bubble. He won the dice roll, and then like I went draw face shifter, and he just looked at me like, "Well, dang, you're just the best player in the universe." And then scooped. I'm like, "Yo, that's nuts." Then even in Top Cut round 12, because I played back to back Mathmex round 11 and 12. The first one actually I hit with shifter in the draw phase, and he gambit. I'm like, all right, so you know, looking at it like this is critical for him, so like he needs to stop this. And then round 12, it was hilarious. I was like, you know what? I wonder. So I went draw face shifter, scooped in 60 seconds. We're able to win that one 2-0 in 10 minutes.
Mm.
So shifter was like actually incredible, if you will. It definitely stole us some matches for sure.
No, that's amazing. And it seems like you had a great tournament experience with a lot of friends. And I think that's really what Yu-Gi-Oh is about. And just getting into the top 64 is a great place to start. And that's like icing on the cake. So um, looking forward to seeing more success from you. As we wrap up, you have any final thoughts?
I mean, final thoughts. Like honestly, first off, again, I do have like 2 quick shout outs. Shout out foremost to Ground Game. Thank you, bro. You're a big part of this. We were in the lab every night for almost like a month to get here. Then shout out to like Cincy Yu-Gi-Oh, bro. One thing, kind of your point of what you're saying, it took some people a moment to get there. Plus One's owner Brian made a post about Andres Torres. It was like a weird fact of him having to play 50 YCSs before he ever got his first top. So I would discourage anyone like that's still like trying to get over that hump. Stay in the lab, stay focused, and then once you get there, the feeling's incredible. As it pertains to like the list, it definitely is clean. I'm glad with like all my homies that helped me like theory craft this and then like help this idea come to fruition. I really vibe with the hybrid. I just honestly going to this didn't feel like the Arise Hard Pass Control would be good enough for this particular event, but it was a meta call. And I'm just glad we, like stuck to that. We just stuck to the plan and it came in.
No, that's great. And I'm glad you stood your ground on that. And we're done here, man.
All right. Appreciate it, man. Have a good one.
Stand your ground.